Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
And this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast.
Hello, my lovely friend. How are you today? I am super, and even more super because I'm joined with my gorgeous friend and colleague and business bestie, Dr. Mary. Hello, gorgeous one. How are you this morning?
I'm tired, business bestie, but I'm all right. I'm tired because my baby only let me get 5 hours sleep. But I'll be fine. I'm fine. But I am a little bit more hungry.
Interesting.
Because of being tired.
Mm-hmm.
There may or may not be a segue there into today's topic.
Well,
how are you?
I am great, really great. Just had a few days off, which was lovely. Again, connecting with my, my besties and spending some time out in nature. So all of those are just really wonderful things to do. And it's interesting because we were all talking about we'd booked this trip away like 12 months ago. And if we hadn't have booked it, we probably wouldn't have gone because, life gets busy and time. So I think it's always good to schedule things that potentially seem a bit indulgent or a bit, like a luxury when really they're not.
Yes. Connection. Vitamin C, the other vitamin C. So good for you.
Absolutely. But today we're going to be talking about something that I think is really super important because, look, I spend a reasonable amount of time just having a look in Facebook groups and on Instagram and just looking at what other people, not necessarily health professionals, are saying around weight loss and health. And there is still a massive myth perpetrated that is just, calorie restriction. Eat less calories and you will lose weight. And so I thought today we'd talk a bit about calories, about hunger, about macros, about all of the things that actually contribute, hormones that contribute to our metabolic health and well-being.
I love it. Beautiful. Back to basics. Yes, I loathe this, the perpetuating of this myth that sustainable weight loss is all about eating less energy and burning more energy. I hate it because it's so overly simplified, it's actually wrong. And it can create this enormous amounts of stigma because it suggests that we are in conscious control of those two things. We're consciously in control of how much energy we consume, and we're in conscious control of how much energy we burn. Therefore, if you've got a problem with your weight, well, you're just a lazy slob.
Lazy, greedy slob.
Lazy, greedy slob. Exactly, which is not at all true and not at all what the science says. And the very important reason that actually weight gain, it's not a problem of eating too much. It really is a problem of hormones and a problem of hunger. And hunger is hormonally controlled. So you can't actually consciously decide to be less hungry. And also we can't consciously decide to burn more because we think that burning more energy, we just got to go for a run. Just got to go for a run. It's got to go move,
go to the gym.
Be lazy. Yeah. But actually, no. What determines how much energy we burn? Exercise actually has a pretty small role in this. Exercise is great for you, by the way. I'm not dissing exercise as a healthy activity. But what actually determines how much energy we burn is our metabolic rate. And we cannot consciously choose to have a faster metabolism. We can't consciously choose to have a metabolism that works more efficiently or quickly at a higher rate. So we're not consciously in control of our hunger or our metabolic rate. And if you are hungry, it's not a character flaw. It doesn't mean that you're greedy.
No. It's interesting, isn't it? I think there's a couple of little concepts to unpick here. So the first one I'd just love to start with is metabolic rate. So for, anybody who may not be aware, your metabolic rate I like to describe it, it's the amount of fuel that your body needs to just function. So, when you're just lying around or you're just sleeping or you're just, walking from your desk to the toilet or whatever it is, it's the amount of fuel that your body uses to run your body. So to beat your heart, to create your enzymes, to puff your lungs in and out, all the things that we just do on autopilot. And unfortunately, there are things that we perhaps have done to reduce our metabolic rate. And what I mean by that is we know that prolonged calorie restriction, aka dieting, will reduce metabolic rate if done long enough and particularly extremely enough. That's well known. And there's also, I guess, and I think this is probably where the exercise thing gets mixed up a little bit in it, because as you said, we're not dissing exercise by any stretch. But we do know that as we get older, all of us, no matter who you are as a human, as you get older, it is our body's natural predisposition to lose some muscle mass. So it's called sarcopenia. It's normal. It is kind of natural, but just unhelpful. It's fine when we all carked it at 60, but now that we're all living to, late 80s, our muscle mass is diminishing, and the less muscle you have, the lower your metabolic rate.
Yeah.
So, as you said, you can't decide, you can't sit on the couch and just tell your body to burn more fuel, burn more calories, body, make, heart beat a bit faster. But you're completely right. It's outside of our control.
Yeah, outside of our conscious control. But there are very healthy and helpful changes that you can make to your life that will both reduce your hunger and get your natural normal hunger back online, and also improve your metabolism, boost your metabolism. But I'd love to start with hunger.
Yeah.
Lucy, I think that until I discovered like the actual hormonal cause behind weight gain, behind obesity, I was always hungry. I had polycystic ovarian syndrome as a child and adolescent and young woman, and I had high insulin, hyperinsulinemia. I was health conscious. I would see the dietitians. I would do what they told me. I would eat my whole grains and my legumes and my low fat meals, and I would have my 3 meals and I'd have my 3 snacks, and I was always hungry. And I did think that this was, a character flaw, especially as a young woman, who was carrying extra weight. Whenever I was eating, I would feel self-conscious, particularly in public. And I can remember when I was a medical student, I stayed in this, was at the Rural Medical School in Ballarat, and we, with all the other medical students, we stayed in this big hostel. It's actually quite fun. I was a graduate student. I was in my 20s, and I was living in this big hostel with 30 other medical students, all in their 20s as well. And we did everything together because we lived together, we studied together, and we ate together. And I would just see these people have their little meal, and then stop and not be ravenously hungry and needing more and constantly fighting the urge to go back to the fridge. And I was really struck at how different my hunger as an overweight woman was compared to my friends and colleagues who weren't overweight. And we just had a significant difference in our hunger.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because what happens with hunger is people will comment on it. What? You can't be hungry again? Like this idea that, you're greedy. You just over, you just wanting, over desire. You just need to control yourself. Stop being so hungry. It's like saying,
that's right.
Stop growing so much. Stop breathing so much. Stop being so hungry. It's like,
Yeah. I think I was told at one point a dietitian said, it's all right, Mary, you just need to go on the ELF diet. I mean, what, the ELF? What's this ELF diet? And, she just smiled at me, this thin woman dietitian telling me what to do, and just said, eat less food. So funny. Punch in the guts. I possibly went home and cried that day. Yes. So my attempts at living on the eat less food diet, the ELF diet, were unsuccessful because you actually can't fight hunger. You can for the short term. Over the short term, you could definitely white knuckle it your way through, and I certainly did, and I would lose weight for a little while. But over time, your hunger will win. But
yes,
and this is what I discovered. You can reduce your hunger. You actually really can heal the underlying metabolic cause that's making your hunger dysregulated in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's really important to do that rather than, because the other thing that grinds my gears is when people are told to reduce their portion sizes. And it's like, nobody's saying, I think there's a couple of ways. Like nuance. Nuance is always the key to everything. Reducing portion sizes. It's like, well, hang on. Do we need to do that because people are, if you're hungry, then you are allowed to eat. Like, it's a basic human desire need to be fulfilled. If you're not honoring your hunger, and maybe people don't know about it, people haven't ever tuned into it, people are often dysregulated, what's the word I'm looking for? Dysregulated from their own body's needs. So they're not in communication.
They're detached.
That's the word I'm looking for. Thanks, lovely. Yeah, so they're detached from their body's physiological needs. But if you're in touch with them and you're hungry, for God's sake, eat. The nuance is going to be what you eat. And again, this is not a judgment. It's of no, I don't care what you eat. You're a human. You're the boss of you. But we can help you with what is helpful to eat if you want to manage your hunger.
Yes. I reckon it could be useful to myth bust two things that are really unhelpful for managing your hunger. Because I was certainly told, and I believe perhaps you were too, Lucy, that the best way to control your hunger is to eat all the time. Have 3 meals and 3 snacks and just constantly shovel food into your face, and that will control your hunger. Except that it doesn't. I don't know who made this up. I suspect it may have been a snack company, snack food company, but it doesn't. That actually is not how human physiology works.
Especially because for the last 50 years, it was always low-fat snacks. So yes, absolutely. If you're hungry, have a low-fat something, processed crusket.
Definitely.
Cruskets, God. Just or
get a nerve then.
Yeah. Or a piece of fruit is the other thing that was supposed to help with your hunger.
Maybe a bit of white bread, snack on nibble on a white bread roll. Yeah. So this doesn't increase, it doesn't reduce your hunger. In fact, it increases it. I mean, au revoir, anybody? Amuse-bouche, like we have known for a long time that appetizers, small amounts of food, actually make you more hungry. That eating regularly whets your appetite. If anything, it doesn't decrease it. And once we start eating, especially if we are hungry, it's going to be our natural human inclination to want to keep eating. Newton's first law of motion, an object in motion will remain in motion. And I like to think of it as thirst because there's no stigma with thirst.
No.
There's no emotional overlay with thirst. I'm thirsty. Oh, you're such a weak person. Buck up, just
ride the wave of thirst.
That's right. That's it. No, yeah. So if you're thirsty, could you imagine that you think the best way to control your thirst is to not have a full drink of water? Oh, no. It's just to take tiny little sips often. Of course we're not going to do that. If you you're thirsty, you have a big drink of water, depending on what you're doing, you're probably not going to be thirsty again for a few hours. You slake your thirst and then your thirst is done. Well, similar thing happens with hunger, except that what we eat, and you alluded to this, Lucy, what we eat strongly influences our hunger, and hunger is hormonal. It's not driven by our moral virtues or our character strength. It's hormonal.
Or
And-
even by an empty stomach. I think that's the other thing. People think
Yes.
it's driven by an empty stomach. So therefore, if you've just eaten, you can't be hungry because you've just eaten. But that I reckon
fill up on
biggest myth of all.
Yeah, that's why the cabbage soup diet doesn't actually usually help result in sustainable weight loss. So, and many of our beautiful clients, Lucy, have had gastric surgery of various types, and they are people who suffered with increased hunger, problems with hunger, just like I did. And very reasonably, the thought would be reduce the size of your stomach, you'll reduce your hunger. Except that doesn't work because it doesn't address the actual hormonal causes that drive the hunger, and only addresses one small aspect of hunger, and might not even do that very well, depending on the type of surgery that's been done. So what actually does what actually heals our hunger? What helps us get back in tune with our normal natural hunger so that we can just fuel our body for fuel, just like we water our body for thirst?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important for people, and again, particularly if you're a bit older like I am, or even older than me, it's hunger hormones, or the hormones that control our hunger and our fullness or satiety. They hadn't been discovered
True.
back in the 80s or
Ghrelin 99.
Yeah.
I reckon. That was when it was,
And even more recently, other little peptides, peptide YY, all of those ones. There's still, and I'm sure there's probably a few others out there that still haven't been discovered, because as humans, we are incredibly complex, although sometimes quite simple. But so yeah, Mary, I would love to hear, you're the biochemist. I would love to hear your, discussion on hunger hormones and how we can work with our body, not against it, in order to minimize hunger. And again, there's nothing wrong with hunger, but when we have, I guess, dysregulated hunger drive, that then contributes to obesity and weight gain and all of those things.
Absolutely. And getting back natural control of your hunger is crucial for sustainable weight loss and metabolic health. And that popular advice of eating 6 times a day just doesn't work, because our main satiety hormones, that satiety means that just feeling full, are the most powerful ones are peptide YY, great name, and that is released in response to us eating protein, and cholecystokinin, another great name, is released in response to us eating dietary fat. And that combination of a bit of protein and a bit of fat is highly satiating. Whereas, Cruskets, an apple, and some white bread, which contain mostly carbohydrates, are not very satiating. So meals that contain fat and protein are going to fill us up. And we know this. You've gone out and you've had dinner and you're nice and full, and someone comes out with the most delicious pork chop imaginable. And would you like this pork chop, Dr. Lucy? And you're like, no way. But if someone comes out with some carbs, that's right, exactly. I'll give you $50 if you eat this pork chop. No, I just don't think I can. I'll give you $50 if you eat the same amount of calories in these Crusket, crisp breads. You might not want to, but you actually could. You could eat the carbohydrates after you're completely full, because they do not stimulate our satiety nearly to the same extent as protein and fat. That we do also, that the feeling of fullness in our stomach is not negligible. We do have stretch fibers within our stomachs. Our stomachs are this little stretchy bags, quite an extraordinary little organ. And if it's stretched just to capacity or a little bit beyond capacity, these stretch fibers will send neuronal signals to your brain, which will just say, don't eat anymore. So that feeling of a full stomach will actually stop us from eating more. We might not necessarily feel satiated. There's not quite the same thing, but it will prevent us from eating more food, definitely. Some types of, bariatric surgery can actually sever those nerves, though, so it can actually destroy that aspect of our satiation. Not all of them, but some of them can. So that's the main thing. There is also another important player which can go awry for many, many people, which is leptin and insulin. So I've told you that if you have a meal that's got a good amount of protein and some nice, a nice amount of fat, you'll feel nice and full. And, so if you had, a lovely piece of, salmon and an egg for breakfast, then you're not going to be starving hungry at 10:30 a.m. But if you had some white bread toast, an apple and some orange juice, you probably will be starving hungry by 10:30 a.m., even if you ate more calories than was in the fish and eggs or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Or a bowl of, cereal, like even, processing as well in there.
Then there is another layer to this. It is very complex, but humans are complex and simple at the same time. Another really complex layer is that if you've got problems with your metabolic health, like I was obese, I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. If you've got obesity or problems with high insulin and insulin resistance, then you are in a state where it's going to be, you are primed to feel more hungry, because if you've got elevated insulin's job, one of its main jobs, is to store our fuel. So it takes the fuel, particularly the sugar from the food that we've eaten, and it stores it as fat. And you're in a fat storage mode. And if you're in this highly primed fat storage mode, then you're going to be taking fuel away from your liver, your muscle, your brain. You could just have eaten, but with high insulin, it's all going to be go off and being stored. And your poor organs, your poor liver, your poor brain, your poor muscle don't actually have any fuel that they can use, because it's all been locked away in that metaphorical woodshed. And yet another layer, but that's reversible, gorgeous people, and we will talk about how. But another layer to that is leptin. So leptin is another relatively recently discovered hormone that's made by our fat cells, and it's released in response to us, our fat cells getting a bit bigger. So get some stored fat into our fat cells, they plump up a little bit, and then they send this signal to our brain saying, hey, we've just been fed. Here's some leptin. This leptin's just letting you know that we've just been fed, so we're good. Don't need any more fuel for a little while. And leptin can reduce appetite, except for when you've got leptin resistance and your brain is unable to respond to that leptin signal. So your fat cells could be getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because your insulin is elevated and elevated and elevated. You could be storing more and more and more and more fat, and you could be making more and more and more and more leptin, but your brain just can't hear it.
No.
And so those appetite reducing effects of the elevated leptin just don't happen.
No, and they become, it's hard because people with leptin resistance also don't feel full. So, the natural off signal that you get with eating, and again, there's genetic drivers in this as well. People who, in fact, I am a fast eater. And I thought that it was behaviorally driven, but I've since learned that there's there's genes for fast eaters and slow eaters. So it's taken that frequently I would do something where I'd fast eat, overeat, and about maybe 20 minutes after I finished go, oh my God, I've eaten too much. But I didn't, it was like the off switch just was a bit slow. So I have realised over time that I have to consciously moderate that behaviour because it's not my natural inclination. And, that's genetic. Who knew?
I have to say, Lucy, I didn't know that because I am a fast eater too, and I know you're a fast eater. I always assumed it was a product of my medical training. I can't actually remember how I ate before being in medical school, but, you're on a 14-hour shift. You don't have time to wee, let alone eat. And if you can't shove that food down your face in negative 20 seconds, then you don't eat.
No.
So that's how I thought. That's why I'm a fast eater. Yeah. It was entirely a learned response.
I'm sure that there's some abilities to enhance our natural response, just as there are techniques that you can employ to negate that natural response. And I think it is helpful to do that. It is helpful to slow your eating down, to allow, the hormones to catch up, the peptide YY, the cholecystokinin, all of those ones to have their effect, because hormones are not necessarily instant like nerve fibers, which are much more instant. So I think that's helpful, but I found that interesting. I thought, so again, not a character flaw that you're a wolfer of food.
Absolutely. Okay, so all right. So eating constantly doesn't help reduce your hunger. Oh, actually, I forgot a hormone. Oh, no. Sorry, people. Before we move on, I've talked about satiety hormones. I haven't talked about our hunger hormones, which I just need to talk about right now. Well, one in particular, Ghrelin. Don't you just love that?
I know, yes.
I love it. I love Ghrelin. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Ghrelin. Easy to remember because it's kind of like grumble. Feels like grumbling along.
Right. Ghrelin. So Ghrelin is one of our most powerful hunger hormones. I talked about the satiety hormones that make you feel like, oh, great, not hungry anymore. But what about the hormones that make you hungry? Fascinating little hormone called Ghrelin. And the interesting thing about Ghrelin is there was a study done by Natalucci et al. In 2005, which showed that it was a small study but a powerful study, that we all get natural spikes in our hunger throughout the day, and they are linked to our circadian rhythm. And the fascinating thing about this is that they spike and will resolve even if we don't eat. So looking at individuals who were eating regularly and individuals who were fasting and tracked their Ghrelin levels in their blood throughout the day. And everyone's Ghrelin levels were at their lowest at about 9 a.m., whether or not they'd eaten breakfast or not. And this is interesting because the people who hadn't eaten breakfast had probably not eaten for about 14 hours. And yet they weren't hungry. And it was fascinating. And then people got a bit of a spike of Ghrelin around about midday. And sort of triggers people to eat lunch. And the Ghrelin levels dissipated after an hour or two, whether people ate lunch or not.
Interesting.
So the people who were fasting, their Ghrelin levels went down. Anyway, same thing happened at dinner. Around about 8 p.m., there was a higher spike in Ghrelin and people were hungry. And again, the Ghrelin and the associated hunger dissipated whether or not they ate or not. So it's fascinating that Ghrelin is intricately linked to many other hormones, including our circadian hormones, and it will it will go away whether or not we eat or don't eat. And intermittent fasting is something we've discussed before. If done well and with the right mindset and in a nurturing, self-loving way, it's a great, powerful tool to heal your metabolic health and to boost your metabolism and to lose weight. It's great for many, many reasons. And when you intermittently fast, Lucy, you'll know this, you do get hungry, but hunger doesn't build and 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 build to the point where, you will just devour all the food in the fridge, including the fridge itself. It comes and it goes.
Indeed. Again, I think though there's some nuance in that because dieting, hey, queen of dieting here, I spent a lot of time being hungry and just I'd run out of points for the day, so I just had to grin and bear it. So, yes, queen of dieting here and having to, I'd run out of points for the day, so I'd eaten my allotted quota of food. The difference I now realise, particularly, was that the dieting I did involved a lot of processed food, a lot of, diet chocolate mousse, a lot of diet yogurt, bars, muesli sort of bars, anything with, Weight Watchers on it. Basically, I ate pre-packaged meals that were, Weight Watchers, eat this and it's 6 points or something. None of those, and it was low fat, so none of those techniques that I used had any, minimal protein and minimal fat. So no wonder I was hungry. So
absolutely. Also, minimal fiber.
Yeah.
So, the effect of that stomach stretch that you get, you're not getting that. And also, they're not healing the issue I talked about previously with the elevated insulin, meaning that your body just isn't able to access the fuel stores that it has. So if you could be fed, but also your individual organs are starving.
Indeed.
Because the elevated insulin is preventing them from being able to access their fuel. So much of traditional diet foods is not going to reduce our hunger. It's actually going to make our hunger worse. Whereas intermittent fasting, when you've got that metabolic healing and you've got your insulin levels normalizing, your leptin signaling is normalizing, your body is in a much more natural and healthy state, you're able to utilize your stored fat stores. That is when you just hunger is under much, much greater control. And how you get your hunger under greater control is with real food.
Yeah, absolutely. And I reckon that is one of the biggest mistakes that people make with intermittent fasting. Fast and furious. They try too hard, too long, too soon. So your body, it doesn't have fuel. Like if it doesn't have fuel, it's just going to conk out. You need to make sure your woodshed is open. And if you're listening to this conversation, I would listen to last week's because we talk a lot about the woodshed. But it's really about making sure you have access to your fuel first. So making sure that these dysregulated hormones are re-regulated, rebalanced. And then if you want to, for therapeutic purposes, introduce some intermittent fasting.
Yes. Breaking up with processed food, reducing the sugar and starches will, and only eating at regular meal times, starting off with, your 2 or 3 meals a day of real food. This is what will heal your hunger. And you can lose weight without being hungry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we need to point out, and maybe we'll cover this next week even, is the idea that there's hunger, physiological hunger, which we've just gone through, that is it's a hormonal process that's driven out of your conscious control. And then, just to confound it all, there's what we love to call the psychological hunger, or our desire, or our emotional hunger, or stress hunger, or whatever phrase you might be used to. But so many people don't address that. And that, I think, is such a big issue, because you can have bariatric surgery and still emotionally eat and find out, and nothing, whatever weight you've lost gets put back on.
And I mentioned right at the very start, I'm sleep deprived, which means that I'm stressed, both physiologically and emotionally stressed. And this increases my hunger, both my physiological hunger. So my Ghrelin is actually increased because of the sleep deprivation and stress on my body. And also I'm more likely to have emotional hunger to soothe all of that fatigue and stress and feeling quite sorry for myself. So yes,
absolutely. I think next week. Why don't we chat about emotional hunger and willpower, because it's also interesting. What is willpower? All of those things. Lots of myths around willpower, but also some truths around what it is and what it isn't. And I would love, because that's one of my fave things. Let's talk about that next week.
Sounds fabulous. It's a date, Lucy.
Excellent. All right, my gorgeous friends, have a beautiful, beautiful day. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will talk to you next week. Bye for now, lovelies.
Bye-bye.
The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.